Myself and my colleagues here at Renewable Properties are in the business of getting more renewable energy onto the grid. And really what that means is, we're on the front lines of fighting climate change. Most of our business looking ahead is really focused on community solar, which is a subsegment of solar that really provides access to solar for those that otherwise wouldn't be able to benefit from it.
Hey, welcome back, Solar Warriors. Thank you for taking time out of your precious day to give us the one non-renewable resource you've got. Of course, your time. Your attention is worth everything to us. So I hope that by the end of this conversation, you'll be walking away with some real nuggets of wisdom, some tactical, practical advice, and you'll feel that you have invested that time in a worthwhile manner. Today's entrepreneur is taking practical experience from not only decade plus time in the solar industry, but deep family roots in real estate to address how we roll out the gigawatts of solar that we need to, and in a way that gives more people access to clean, reliable electricity. Renewable Properties was founded by Aaron Halimi as the sophomore act to his development career in companies like Borrego, if you remember. We may or may not joke about how Aaron and Aaron both were at Borrego at the same time, and we're often confused for one another. Nevertheless, once you get to know Aaron, you won't confuse him for anyone else. He's a very distinct and a very distinct individual who has carved out a place in the industry that certainly has a reputation, having partnered with Borrego and many others. I'm excited today to explain the ways that they've developed hundreds of megawatts of projects, multiple transactions across the United States, and are helping to evolve how the solar industry sells solar, in particular community solar, and probably additional products that we'll dig into. If you like to dig into these kinds of stories, the founders on the front lines of the clean energy transition, you, my friend, are in the right place. I welcome you in. If it's your first time, I hope you'll subscribe to the podcast so that you don't miss a single episode that comes out twice a week, just like this. Deep executive profiles of folks like Aaron, and tactical, practical episodes on Tuesdays that dive into specific subject matter expertise to help you further your business and your career. For now, I want you to buckle your seats. We're going to dive into another practical, powerful conversation here on SunCast. Aaron, let's kick things off at really a high level, thinking about the core problem that you maybe at a Thanksgiving or holiday dinner might describe as the why you're in business trying to roll solar out on as many farm properties as possible.
Yeah, well, I mean, at its core, myself and my colleagues here at Renewable Properties are in the business of getting more renewable energy onto the grid. And really what that means is, we're on the front lines of fighting climate change. I mean, it's a mission-driven business. That's the problem that we're tackling. And we play within a certain subsegment of the market, but at a really high level, we're in the business of fighting climate change and getting more renewable energy onto the grid.
With that in mind, then, for those who are unfamiliar with Renewable Properties, why don't you introduce the company that you've created to try and solve that problem?
Yeah, absolutely. Renewable Properties at its core develops, owns, and operates renewable energy projects throughout the United States. We primarily target projects that range anywhere from 1 to 20 megawatts in size, typically connecting at distribution level voltages, and most of the time selling power to utilities on a wholesale basis, although most of our business looking ahead is really focused on community solar, which is a subsegment of solar that really provides access to solar for those that otherwise wouldn't be able to benefit from it. So, those that may not own their home, those that may not have the economic means to put solar on their house. They may not have the right geography or geometry of their house. They may have trees. They may be a renter or a small business owner. And, community solar as a construct provides a framework for those that otherwise couldn't access solar, provides a mechanism for them to access it, both in terms of the economic benefits, but also the environmental benefits in providing a avenue and forum for those to really take part in fighting climate change.
We've covered community solar here quite a bit in depth. For those who are relatively unfamiliar, roughly how long, you and I've been in this industry for a long time. How long did you kind of sit on the sidelines watching the community solar segment build before you realized, like, wait, I've got something I can contribute here? And what was the impetus that really pushed you into creating a business around it?
Yeah, those are great questions. So I guess just to kind of back up, I've been in solar for about 15 years. I got into solar back in January 2008 through the land side of a deal. As you mentioned earlier, I spent a good amount of my career working at Borrego Solar alongside many other solar entrepreneurs and folks that I still call close friends to this day. A lot of them actually work with me at Renewable Properties now. And so when I started Renewable Properties about 6.5 years ago, we were primarily just focused on small scale utility projects. So, 1 to 20 megawatts, distribution level interconnects, but really selling power to utilities on a wholesale basis. This was March of 2017. And back then, community solar was just kind of starting to make a name for itself. Primarily the Massachusetts SMART program was really like the game in town that everybody was focused on. And, back then community solar really was a smaller segment of the industry. And a lot of the folks that were doing it were vertically integrated and had the subscription capabilities in-house. And so I think the big thing that changed for us and for most of the market and a lot of the growth is that the rise of the third-party subscriber company, right? So other companies that are not developer, owner, operators, but folks that really just focus on the customer acquisition and the ongoing customer management. Those companies were forming. Those companies started to become more mature, and ultimately the market became more mature as well. And so at that point in time, we said, okay, community solar is something that fits to our core competency of, developing land. So going out and securing parcels of land and getting the permits and getting the interconnection agreements and securing all the contracts with the utilities and getting the financing and construction and all that great stuff that goes into actually building a renewable energy project. We said, okay, we can apply the same set of skill sets to this community solar segment that's rapidly growing because, let's be honest, it just makes a lot of sense, right? It provides an avenue for those to access solar that otherwise wouldn't get it. And it provides it with savings, right, for these customers. It's really a win-win mechanism, if you will. And so I think that's why you've seen it now roll out in over 20 states across the country. And so all those things combined kind of led us to say, okay, let's start pivoting into community solar. And now, as I sit here today, about 80% of our pipeline, development pipeline, we have a gigawatt of solar and energy storage development pipeline is geared towards community solar programs across the country.
Wow. That's a massive number for community solar. That makes you guys one of the larger developers for sure. So you mentioned the rise of third-party aggregation of subscribers, and it ties to something else that I was really curious about, because one is to acknowledge the opportunity that arose, the pivot that internally you guys decided on how to redirect your resources, that being for community solar as a category, a way to sell the electrons. You also mentioned the Mass Smart program. I think timing is everything for entrepreneurs. So if you think back over the last 5, 10, 15 years that we've been in the industry, what do you think really needed to be true? Why would this have failed if not for fill in the blank?
What's interesting about this business, right, is it's very much a bleeding edge business, right? We're developing clean energy assets. Now, with the electrification of pretty much everything, those product types can kind of move into other things other than energy generation, which I'm sure we'll get to in a little bit. But what's interesting about that is it's also a capital intensive business, right? And so you need a lot of capital to get these projects done. And so you kind of see this, bleeding edge technology piece intersect with a real capital intensive, project finance heavy, need. And so where I'm going with that is in the early days of community solar, the project finance community didn't really want to touch it, right? They were like, oh, how does this work? Like, this is risky. Like, those subscribers could maybe leave. Like, how does this work? there's an education process that was going on. And so I think without tax equity and debt truly taking the time to understand the regulatory frameworks and the policies, which again are state specific in solar, it makes that learning curve even that much bigger, right? Or more nuanced. Without those financing parties really saying, okay, yeah, this is a product type that we can get behind. I mean, I can make the argument to you that it's actually on a risk-adjusted basis far superior than a utility bus bar PPA, which I'm happy to go into in a minute. So it's those folks as well as the third-party subscriber companies. I really don't think community solar would be proliferating like it is today if there weren't companies saying, okay, I'm just going to focus on customer acquisition and customer subscription, because that skill set is different than the folks that do project development, right? And so I'm a great example of that. I don't do the subscription in-house. I partner with other solar companies that do that, right? And just like those subscriber companies don't develop, they partner with companies like me to get access to projects, right? And so, and you have lots of examples of that innovation across the solar value chain over the years. I mean, that's one of the great things about the solar industry is that, to your earlier point, it requires a lot of elbow grease or grit to ultimately get these projects done, right? The cliche term of the solar coaster is a real thing. It is very real. And for those of us that have been around for a while, we've experienced all the ups and downs. And, all of that kind of combined, I think, gets you to a place where, the industry has continued to mature. And it's wild to think about where we were 10 years ago. It's wild to even think about where we were 5 years ago, right? If you look at like the project finance market 5 years ago relative to where it is today and relative to where it's going on the heels of the IRA, I mean, it's very exciting. It's very exciting.
It's fascinating as you go through explaining how the industry is evolved, in particular things like Massachusetts SMART program, Colorado, and Michigan, so many different markets taking the mantle, passing it, that have built incremental change to bring a community solar market to fruition. Illinois and many others where they, for us on the solar coaster, we have to ride the boom and bust of regulators trying to figure out how to turn the dials, how to tweak the knobs and figure out where incentive needs to be applied, because a lot of markets are coin fed, So it's fascinating for me to think from a development perspective. Not only you wait for the aggregators to have the sophistication to be able to bring enough subscribers on board, you have to wait for finance, tax equity and debt to get comfortable with regulatory framework, which is super complicated on a state level basis. But you, day in and day out, have to still build this portfolio. The good news is you're building inventory of a product that has multiple outlets. Some are more profitable than others as a business person. How do you think about where a company like Renewable Properties sits in the overarching architecture of the solar industry generally, and also the community solar sector? And I want you to answer that through the following question. Who do you sell to, and what problems do you solve for those clients? I think it might be more than meets the eye.
It's the who do you sell to is an interesting one. I remember when I was interviewing, actually, many years ago. This was in early 2010 or late 2009. I was interviewing this person. He was like, "Yeah, it's a sales job." I was like, "Well, this is like project development. What do you mean it's a sales job?" He's like, "It's a sales job. Like talking to the landowner, that's a sale. Talking to the permitting agency, that's a sale. Talking to the utility company, that's a sale. Talking to these," and he went on and on and on. And you actually you're constantly selling in this business. But what we are selling is, it's a little different who the audience is. So this all starts, first of all, we're to answer your other question, Renewable Properties at its core is a greenfield developer. We're a greenfield developer that then finances, owns, and operates majority of the projects that we develop or originate on our balance sheet long term. Some would call that an independent power producer. And that's really kind of what we are. But really at our core, like, what do we do really well? What do we do better than everybody else is develop projects. And developing projects starts with site acquisition. I mean, that's how I got into this business back in 2008, was through the real estate side of the deal. So Renewable Properties is really focused on site acquisition and has a very good playbook around how we go and secure our sites and how we interact with landowners. And that's really, in community solar, that's the biggest sale that you do. The rest of it, in some markets, can be kind of programmatic, right? Okay, so I have my site secured, then I go file for interconnection. My interconnection comes back economically viable. Then I go get my permits. Okay, I have my permits. Now I get my incentive or award for that community solar program. I've secured that. Now I go and I partner with the third-party subscriber company to subscribe the project. All right, now I go and I get my EPC lined up to build it. I go get my financing, right? I go and I build it, and I get my O&M provider, and then I'm owning and operating this thing, right? That's just pumping clean electrons into the grid. And so every step of the way, there's a sale. Sometimes people are selling us, in other instances, we're selling them. But to your point, we touch a lot of people throughout the solar value chain. And, greenfield developers add a tremendous amount of value in this industry. I mean, it's a big, big part of the business.
One of the things that stood out for me, we were talking in one of our last conversations about the pressure of the early days, the consequence of losing a deal when you've got 10 deals in the pipeline versus a gigawatt in the pipeline. You've had some tremendous success building sort of success on success, putting those blocks in place, becoming excellent at site acquisition. It's the blocking and tackling of project development. Can you talk a bit about some of the milestones that you think about or that you share with your team that are proof points that what you're doing not only matters, but is validated in the marketplace? A couple of things that stand out to me are some of the early projects where you got to go do a deal with your old boss and Borrego, right? A really important deal for you guys early in your career and them. You've also recently announced both a $50+ million portfolio and securing a $25 million capital investment. What can you tell us about some of the things that have become, that you can point to as examples of what might be considered success in this game?
Yeah, no, that's great. And there's kind of like two ways to answer that, right? There's financial milestones in the company history that are, okay, we're doing something right. We secured a big chunk of money from this serious institutional investor, and those are great milestones that we point to and celebrate along the ways. And then there's the blocking and tackling, like the project specific milestones that you point to and you celebrate. And for Renewable Properties, going back to your point, when I started the company and the kitchen table in my rent controlled apartment here in San Francisco, it was me putting my head down, doing what I know how to do, and going out and securing sites and developing projects. And believe it or not, so in development, you're doing, it's a low success rate, right? Like if someone's a greenfield developer and says, oh yeah, like majority of the deals that I take on, I actually get to completion. I don't think that's true. It's a risky proposition. You're underwriting a low success probability in general. And then it's all about kind of how you mitigate your development spend, getting to that yes or no. And for us, the first land option that I signed actually ended up being the first deal that Renewable Properties built, which you mentioned. We hired Borrego Solar as our EPC. Now, there was many other land options that I signed from that first one forward that didn't, materialize, but it just so happened that the first site that we put under option ended up being our flagship project, and that's here in the Greater Bay Area. It's called the American Canyon Solar Project. It's located in Napa County, with the off-taker being MCE, formerly known as Marin Clean Energy. They're the largest CCA in the state of California, the original CCA, a client that we've done a tremendous amount of business with over the years. But that was a big one for the company back then. And there's been other projects along the way. As you mentioned, as the company was ramping up from, really when I raised our first outside round of capital was 10 projects totaling 60 megawatts to now a gigawatt pipeline across 150 projects. there was a period of many years where it was like, okay, like this deal has to happen because it's going to make
Yeah.
or break, some things. And it was high stress. Now, fortunately, those days are behind us. But yeah, it's one of those businesses where the more chips you have on the table, the overall risk profile of your business goes down dramatically, right? If you're all in on one or two investments versus, have it spread across 150, it's a better deal.
You, in many ways, have spent the last 6+ years building out the equivalent as a project developer of a venture capital portfolio, right?
Yeah.
Not all of them are going to win. Not all projects are going to come across the finish line. They're not all going to be on profitable or successful nodes where you can get interconnection. And it's learning how to, as a venture capital would, place those bets. That is a part of the fabric of the playbook and how you do it. How do you get your team comfortable with that? Because for you, you're the venture capitalist, right? But the teams operate, the developers on your team now, like they are now in the place where they have to build out a portfolio of projects where if one misses, it doesn't ruin their annual lunch, so to speak. How do you think about that from a culture perspective as well?
Culture is something that we prioritize greatly here at Renewable Properties. It's probably the thing I am the most proud of is the team that we've assembled, that the company culture that we have built. And one of the foundational kind of cornerstones to that is transparency. The company is now 50 people across the United States. Our employees range from folks that it's their first job out of college to folks that are 20, 30 years seasoned into their professional careers, in everything in between. And the one piece of feedback that I get consistently from the team is that they appreciate the transparency and the candor around how the company is performing, both, qualitatively and quantitatively. We do quarterly offsites where we just had it actually last week, where we review the previous quarter's performance. We talk about our financial statements. We talk about our pipeline. We talk about where we're going as a business. And I think it's something that you cannot, it's just something that is so critical if you're in this line of work, right? Like if you're in this line of work and you're not being transparent and you're trying to hide the ball, to the other point, it'd be hard for those people on the front lines to truly understand, okay, is this going to make or break me kind of thing, right? And so it's good business practice in general, and it sounds silly saying it, but there's plenty of companies out there that don't necessarily see it the same way.
I mean, you guys are doing a tremendous job, by the way, of getting out in front of news cycles, and we'll talk about some of the stuff that you've been involved in from a writing perspective, just getting using words as capital. But let's talk about the dollars as capital for a moment. I mentioned the 53 million portfolio, the Fund 9, and also the 25 million. On the outside looking in, there are a lot of folks who just wouldn't understand the differentiation between different capital structures. So before I jump really into a lot of the other things that really help to serve folks understanding how you grew up or how you built the business, could you parse for us a little bit the differentiation in those announcements that really came in fairly rapid succession? One in August, one in November.
So the business is capital intensive. It's capital intensive both on the project side and on the corporate side. And so on the project side, we've raised something like a little over 450 million of project capital. So that's, tax equity, permanent debt, construction debt to facilitate the build out of a little over 150 megawatts of solar across 37 projects. That's separate from the amount of capital we've raised at the corporate level. So our first outside actually, if I let me just back up. So the amount of committed corporate capital that we have today is about $135 million. I had to think about that because, as you mentioned, we just closed a $25 million line of credit at the corporate level to continue to facilitate our growth. So yeah, it's a lot, and we have not used all the capital that we have raised. A big part of this business is staying in front of it and keeping your powder
Yeah.
dry. The swings are large, especially as the amount of projects that you're pushing through the machine. So it's a working capital problem
Yeah.
that you're solving for. So as you're pushing more projects through your machine, that working capital problem just grows, and so you need to continue to stay in front of it. And yeah, so it's been a priority. Again, kind of going back to my experience of being in the industry, I've seen too many entrepreneurs in this industry create a tremendous amount of value and not be able to capture it for themselves as a result of poor capital planning, as a result of being caught short. And so that also has been very front and center for me as I started Renewable Properties 6.5 years ago, and still to this day, despite all the success that we've had.
Could you talk to me about, I just want to back out a bit and give folks a sense of really who you are and kind of what formed you. You're the eldest of three brothers, born and raised in Chico, California. How did cowboy boots come into sort of the story of the making of Aaron Halimi?
It's a big part of the story, very big part. So I grew up selling cowboy boots at my father's Western wear store up in Chico, California, ever since the age of 8 years old. So going back to the other comment of this being a sales job, I've been selling cowboy boots for a really long time, catering to the clientele that are typically the same clientele when securing land for solar projects, right? Rural,
Yeah.
agricultural, farmers, cattle grazers, or just landowners in general. So that played
I'm sure that plays in. Yeah, we said the same word, plays into understanding the psyche
correct.
of those buyers.
Correct.
I love how that we were able to weave that in, because I intentionally ask, who are your buyers? Who do you sell to? Because I want to give folks a chance to understand the multivariate equation that developers are, and sort of tightrope developers are walking. But it ultimately, a lot of folks didn't realize this back when you and I were getting in the game, how important it is. You'd see city slickers going out trying to lease land, and the guys that were really doing it well were going out in a beat up truck with jeans and boots on and talking about farm stuff, not about converting the farm to some other type of asset. So, does being the eldest in the family contribute in any way to your sense, like a sense of ownership, obligation, entrepreneurship? Where did you first see that seed planted?
Yeah. No, it's a great question, William. My father's an entrepreneur, and as I mentioned earlier, grew up selling cowboy boots with him, and you know, talking about business around the dinner table or at the home was very, very common, and still is today as we get together as a family, um, and so I think that played a big part of it. And you're correct, I'm the eldest of three boys. We're all about 5 years apart,
Oh, wow.
and you're still very close, very close with my brothers and
Mm.
family, and they've played a big part of my success. When I started Renewable Properties, the first round of outside capital that I raised was a friends and family round. And it was a true friends and family round where I had some family and had a lot of friends and had some industry colleagues and cobbled together about $1 million across 18 people. And then things got real. And quite honestly, all those people are still with me today as investors in this business. And so,
And those are all the corporate level?
yeah, all at the corporate level. Yeah.
Man,
Yes.
what a cool ride to be able to take with your friends.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah.
One of the things that I know is important for you, given the ethos of growing up in a part of California that really, it's a part of California that most people don't truly understand. We laughed at folks. I come from a very farm town culture. It's rural South Carolina. And I moved to California, and people were like, "Oh, it's just beach bums and, Silicon Valley rich kids." And I was like, "Actually, no. That's like the thinnest sliver of the state,
Yeah.
all the way on the coast."
Yeah.
The rest of the state would gladly chop that piece of the country, the state, off, give it its own name. There's a deep American culture of farming and oil and family, routine, resilience, self-reliance. How does that ethos circle back for you to the mission of the business that you've created?
The mission of getting more renewable energy onto the grid doesn't happen without being able to work with those people that you're describing. Rural landowners across the United States, not just California, but across the United States. When I started Renewable Properties, I had two discrete development strategies. One was here in the Bay Area with MCE, and the other one was in South Carolina. So I was constantly getting on a plane, flying across the country to meet with landowners in rural South Carolina to sign options to start my business. And
Where in South Carolina? I'm from South Carolina.
yeah, so we're primarily targeting the upstate, so Greenville and Spartanburg County specifically.
Yeah, Duke territory.
Yeah, Duke territory. We have a portfolio of projects out there now as a result of that initial effort, 6.5 years ago. And so very much, that ethos that you're describing, and you're spot on. I think a lot of people forget that if you drive, an hour east from where I'm located here, and I'm sitting in downtown San Francisco right now, middle of California looks a lot more like middle America than it does coastal California.
You don't have to go far either.
No, you don't have to go the full hour. You probably go 30 minutes and find it, to be honest with you.
Exactly.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's where I grew up, and that's where my family still is. And it's a big part of who I am. And quite frankly, I attribute a lot of my success to that upbringing and that knowledge base, and being a person who prides himself on being able to connect with all walks of life, and find connection with people.
All energy is local. As our friend Bill Nussey likes to say, local energy is all that matters. And that means that all of the, everything is distributed. We have to learn to operate at a local level. Like what a testament to your ability to take what you knew as entrepreneurship, as well as what you learned later in life as real estate, and match it to the opportunity to bring local power to many families and farmers, where the following generations, my generation, is not taking the mantle to run the farm. They're looking for other uses for that farm, or they're looking to sell it, to put it towards some other entrepreneurial venture that the family's engaged in, or growing trees, or farming other items, right? Why not farm electrons?
Yep.
Well, I think what would be really fun as well to tell, because you got a bunch of fun stories, is helping SunEdison get into the utility scale solar game.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So as I mentioned earlier, I got into solar through the land side of the deal back in January of 2008. And really, my passion for fighting climate change and really making it my business ethos and what I'm going to devote my career to dates back to my time in graduate school here in San Francisco, in the MBA program at University of San Francisco, and taking a managerial ethics course where, determined that I could align my ethical perspective with my business practices. And this was back in 2006. So the rise of the green economy was a thing that people were talking about. And you had all these, things intersecting. You had, politics and, regulatory frameworks, renewable portfolio standards starting to come to be. You had, the capital markets getting interested, and you had star power. You had celebrities talking about it and really wanting to kind of do something. And so you had all these things converging around a sector that had really been around for a while, right? I mean, solar's been around since 1980, or even before 1980, 1970, right? Like, it's been around for a really long time. But you had this confluence of events that really started to make it mainstream. And I said, okay, I'm going to devote myself to this. And so I'd gotten done with graduate school, and I originally was, harnessed my energy around green real estate development. So developing energy efficient buildings, LEED certified, water efficient, on-site renewables, sustainable materials, things like that. And ultimately, while I was trying to figure that out, my family had some land up in rural Northern California that they weren't doing anything with. And I was like, you know what? Maybe we could, do a solar farm out there. Again, a renewable portfolio standard was just happening. PG&E was talking about doing solar. And so I started cold calling the utilities, PG&E specifically, and the few solar companies that existed back then, and was trying to get them to put a solar project on my family's land. And so my pitch ended up being, lease my land to put solar here. Fast forward about a year and a half later, I ended up signing a land lease with SunEdison. It ended up being their first utility scale land lease in middle of 2009. The project ultimately did not get built, but as you can imagine, I learned a tremendous amount about solar development through that process, and ultimately took some money that we were generating off that lease and optioned a second piece of property that was better suited for solar development, and had a couple solar projects going entrepreneurially on the side when my day job was doing real estate investment work. And ultimately said, this is fun. I want to do this full time, and ended up landing a job at Borrego Solar and worked there for many, many years as a developer, and did a lot of projects with the Hall brothers and the rest of the executive team and folks at Borrego. And so, yeah, that's the story.
That's a great story, man. I love how you followed your instinct in particular. A lot of us in that time frame. I was in grad school finishing in 2006 as well, looking at getting lead AP, looking at renewables, ultimately started a residential solar company in Central California. Like, we were all in the same trajectory, seeing the same opportunity. And I didn't have land in California or South Carolina that I could lease at the time. Nobody would have cared in South Carolina at the moment. But it's fascinating having been on sort of another side of the pool, kind of watching everything work, and having worked with SunEdison, to think about the team that you had been working with there and the foresight that it took to scrap together the knowledge that far ahead of the market on leasing the land. I mean, Aaron, I don't know if I shared this with you, but one of my bosses back when I was in project development said something that always stuck with me. He said, solar is real estate without the occupancy risk. I'm sure you can appreciate that. Can you talk a bit about the similarities of real estate and why, in fact, a lot of successful solar developers have real estate as a background?
I describe solar as a real estate development deal with an added layer of complexity. Your added layer of complexity is that you're dealing in many instances with an incumbent utility, so a single off-taker, a single counterparty that you can sell to. Now, that's not the case in community solar, which is one of the other great benefits of community solar, is its liquidity in the market in terms of your ability to bring in different customers and you swap them out. It's highly liquid from a revenue perspective, but just generally speaking, this is a real estate development deal. That's what it is. In fact, a lot of people invested in my business early on, given my strong background in real estate and my understanding of real estate. That's really, when I say real estate, that's all encompassing, right? That's the economics of land, that's title, the different encumbrances or liens or restrictions or easements, right-of-ways, things that could trip you up if you're not experienced in that regard.
Yeah.
And then last, but certainly not least, probably most importantly, ability to navigate local, complex permitting processes, right? Getting those discretionary land use approvals, which ultimately are the thing that is holding us back the most, right? I mean, what's really holding back this engine? There's a couple things. Interconnection, right? Ability to connect to available capacity. The grid is old. The grid needs to be upgraded to take on all this additional generation. But the other thing, the thing that if I'm at a dinner party and I talk about what I do and they say, oh, that must be great, everybody loves it. Or at least in the early days, they said that. Nowadays, they know that it's a polarizing topic.
Yeah.
That local opposition is there, and that is in many instances holding us back from achieving our climate change goals.
The transition for you to community solar is in many ways, I would say, I would look at it as kind of whole cloth. You were a pure play project developer looking at the 1 to 20 what we call DG utility space, and said, well, there's clearly a better way to position this product. Again, as an entrepreneur, we're in the business of creating products, finding buyers for those products, selling those products for equal or shared value, right? You need to have profit and profit margin, and the better you can improve your profit margin while still delivering a great product, that means your ability to scale is gives you an advantage over competitors who can't do that. Specifically, community solar, you have said, is you can effectively prove, or there are ways to point to how it is a less risky business than utility scale bus bar based solar. Could you unpack that a little for us? You just mentioned the liquidity. Talk a little bit more in detail.
Sure. So I think it's twofold. First and foremost, the utility scale business historically is dominated by RFPs. And so in order to get a PPA for a utility scale project, you have to bid into a utility RFP, or what's been the flavor of the last couple of years is the RFP for a large corporate offtake on a utility scale deal. So you're bidding into those programs, has a very low probability of success of getting awarded that revenue contract, and that revenue contract is ultimately what allows you to get project financing to construct that project, right? To actually monetize your asset. Community solar, on the other hand, is not an RFP program. It's typically a regulatory framework. There's a program, there's an incentive, there's an application process, but it's not as low probability as, let's say, bidding into a large competitive solicitation. So I think that's one point of differentiation. So you as a developer, if you're a developer at your core, those assets that you're developing have a higher likelihood of getting to monetization if you're chasing community solar programs instead of utility RFPs, right? That aside, let's say you get that utility RFP. Let's say you get that utility contract, that busbar PPA. If that utility goes out of business, if that utility contract expires, you don't really have many places you can go with that electricity. Right? You can dump it into the wholesale market, but that's really kind of it. Community solar, on the other hand, you're subscribing with hundreds, if not thousands, of customers on a given asset. If a subscriber decides that they don't want to be part of this anymore and they leave, you simply just replace them with somebody else. It's highly liquid. It's interchangeable, right? The credit risk, the credit profile is not necessarily as critical, because if you have an issue, it's easy to just swap them out. And so I consistently make the argument that it's actually a safer deal. It's a better deal than owning a utility deal. Now, I might be a little biased because I've now pivoted my entire business to this product type, but maybe I'm not. Maybe it's just that I did the analysis, and I'm a business guy, and on a risk-adjusted basis, that's where I can make the most money for myself and my shareholders and my employees.
I love that. You're answering a lot of things that sort of are sitting in the back of my mind around the pros and cons, how one weighs the options as an entrepreneur. And, you want to take the path of least resistance, both for electrons, that's what they want to do, as well as for capital. And it took a while for capital to get comfortable with the fungibility of the electrons, fungibility as well of the credit score. I mean, the credit score is a big piece of this. There's a lot of shoulders that folks are able to stand on now of folks that really went to battle, yourself included, to ensure that the regulations were put in place, that the capital allocation providers, the debt and equity providers, could believe that the ability to swap subscribers was a more fungible and liquid market than the ability to lock in one of these sort of tried and true utility deals. I want to get into a little bit of storytelling here, because I feel like our industry just does not do a good job of it. You've done a great job. I think you've gotten great coverage for yourself, and I see you putting thoughtful, candid conversations in place around public perception, around what's happening with California federal incentives for community solar. Talk a bit at the outset just around the fundamental importance of storytelling and how you are weaving it into the business of growing your own solar enterprise?
The biggest job for a solar developer is education. This business is fundamentally about educating those that you're interacting with. It's telling them what solar is and what it isn't. There's a lot of misinformation out there nowadays, certainly all over the internet, and so a big part of the job is storytelling. What is solar? Solar is a safe, reliable way to get clean energy onto the grid. There's no hazardous materials. There's no noise. There's no odor. There's no traffic. Solar is actually a good neighbor in your community. It's a way in which you can ensure that that parcel of land isn't going to be a paved parking lot or the next, mall or
next
strip
Target.
center or office building, right? And that's really important. I think the other piece of it is, what are we solving for? So I'll give you a real example. Just the other day, we have a project here in California where we're having a tough time with the local jurisdiction on getting our project through the process. And they're going back and forth over this technical study, a decommissioning plan, which, quite frankly, is typically not something that you go back and forth with, a county on. And I said to my team, I said, hey, have we communicated to these folks what this project does for their local community? Have we sat there and said, hey, this is a disadvantaged community project. This is a project that actually provides economic savings to low to moderate income people in their county and in their surrounding area. Do they know that? Do they know that they're actually being obstructionist to a project that is not only getting clean energy onto the grid, combating climate change, but also helping those in need? Do they really know that? Because if they don't, they need to know that. Because once they know that, we might be able to move them off high center, right? And so I think we as an industry have to prioritize educating those that we're doing business with. We cannot be shy about the economic benefits as well as the environmental benefits that our projects are bringing. And the fact that it's a low use development, it's a low impact development. So it doesn't really draw much on those city or county services. And in many areas across the country can generate additional tax revenue for those jurisdictions.
What do you think that the media and perhaps obstructionists that are feeding the media get wrong about, or what are the narratives that we have to combat, and what do people get wrong about the business generally that we have to set straight?
A lot of it is fear of the unknown.
Mm-hmm.
So fear of the unknown, again, thinking that, these projects generate EMF, that these projects have hazardous materials, that these projects create noise, odor, traffic, all of these intensive land uses, right? Like the biggest misconception when you're dealing with permitting a solar project is someone's like, oh, this is an industrial use. Don't put that industrial use on agricultural land. Well, wait a second. An industrial use is like a parking lot in a building and they're, manufacturing something. Like, hold on, time out. I'm talking about leaving the ground as it is, driving some steel posts into the ground, erecting a racking, structure and putting solar panels on the rack. In fact, that ground below it is open space still. I can plant a pollinator plant meadow. I can have sheep graze there. I could have honeybees there. I could have row crops there. I could do all sorts of things and still utilize that land. It's not an industrial use. This is a low impact use. So it's a big kind of piece, right? The other piece is around conservation. It's actually tied to it. A lot of people, fall out of their chair and they're like, wait a second, local conservation groups, environmentally minded people are opposing your solar project? I say, yeah. They think I'm, gonna, destroy the ecosystem here by putting this project. But in fact, I'm not. And here's why not. Right? And here's all the reasons why I'm not. And I guess the other thing that is an education thing, which this is somewhat binary, but it's just it's subjective is what it is the visual aesthetics of solar, right? Some people say, I don't want to look at solar. I don't like what it looks like. Well, hold on a second. I like what it looks like. I like looking at it because it tells me that we're actually trying to do something about this problem called climate change.
Yeah.
And so the visual aesthetics about I want to see it, I don't want to see it becomes a hot topic of debate when trying to get a project through. Or even like if I'm talking to someone about what I do, I'll get an unsolicited comment about, oh, I can't stand looking at solar panels. Okay,
Yeah.
that's great. You can't stand them. That's great. But guess what? I love them.
Yeah. That's
And,
like saying I can't stand looking at Lamborghinis. Does it
Sure. There you go.
Does it remind you of something that you don't like about cultural icons? I don't know. Yeah. So I will point folks to an article you guys got in PropMoto as well. Real estate loves community solar, public perceptions hampering growth. There's a lot going on in the zeitgeist right now around how we can get the right kinds of incentives aligned and the right kinds of distractions removed in terms of elevating the community solar voice. Is there anything that about that article or some of the other stuff that you've written on that you'd like to talk about here for folks that are maybe unfamiliar with some of the obstruction that's happening in markets that are preventing community solar?
I think we covered it kind of in some of my previous comments, but what I will say is that states across the country are starting to take notice, and some states are better about it than others. And some states are mandating that towns and counties have solar ordinances and that provide a clear path to permitting a solar project if that solar project meets those standards. Illinois is a great example of that right now. Despite those standards, there's still opposition. I mean, we just had a project the other day that's running into a lot of opposition, and we're going to have to, really go the distance on this one. And that's what I would ask. If you're a local policymaker and you're listening to this, know that you can take a leadership position. Climate change is a global problem, but it requires local solutions. So it requires people at the local level to really spend the time to look at it and to create a pathway for permitting these projects. And so, I'd love to see more of that. In my home state of California, has the CEQA process, which is an incredibly challenging permitting process. And I would love to see the state of California pass some legislation to expedite the permitting of solar projects through that process, because it's littered with landmines and delays in many instances, subjective criteria.
Is there state regulation or policy that you observe as best in class that other states could follow suit?
Yeah. So I think New York does a good job from a community solar framework perspective. I think they also have a decent, way in which solar ordinances are created, although they have these moratoriums that are placed, which really can delay things immensely. So I'm not too fond of that. Illinois, like I said, recently passed that piece of legislation that effectively requires all towns and counties to have a solar ordinance, and that there's a path to actually getting a solar project done. So that's obviously great. We'd love to see more of that. So most of my examples are more on the community solar framework side than the permitting side, just because I think there's still a lot of work to do on the permitting side.
Well, we've seen the market evolve. In fact, the very existence of community solar as what we call the fourth vertical is an evolution in the industry. Any notable evolution lately that helps you differentiate in the marketplace you'd like to speak on?
Yeah. So when I think about my company, I think about us as a company that specializes in developing distributed energy resources. So electrical infrastructure projects at distribution scale. So we started out developing solar projects. That is our bread and butter. We do that very well. We continue to do that. We have started doing energy storage, both standalone energy storage as well as solar plus storage in many markets. And our newest product type that we're launching that we're super excited about is EV infrastructure. So EV infrastructure, charging depots specifically for medium to heavy duty fleets that are focused on last mile deliveries. And, you know, the commonality across all those different product types is very simple. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's the real estate, right? The site acquisition, the securing the sites that have viable interconnection, that have viable paths to permitting, right? Anybody can secure a site, but can you secure a site that has a high likelihood of success? That's what differentiates us from others. And so taking that playbook and applying it to other product types, other energy product types, now something that we're doing and really excited about. And you know, I used to get that feeling, that warm fuzzy feeling about, I still get it about solar, but back in 2008, when I was like trying to figure this out, I was like, oh, if I can figure this out, like this is going to be awesome. I get that feeling about EV charging right now, about EV infrastructure specifically. And I've had it for a while, and we're excited. We just recently bought our first piece of land for a EV charging project. So we're not just talking about it, we're actually doing it. We haven't built anything yet, but we are financially committed. And so we're super excited about it. And I think it's going to be a great growth story for not only our business, but for the industry.
I'm really excited to hear you saying that. Do you see the opportunity as, from a real estate development perspective, as a complement to or potential competition for companies like Forum?
I think Forum is one of a handful of companies that exist that are targeting this market right now, and is identical to the competitive landscape back in 2008 for solar, when there was maybe a handful of companies doing it. And look at us now with hundreds of companies with plenty of opportunity across the United States. It's going to be the same. If anything, it actually could potentially be a bigger market.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen a number of developers like the guys there and Dan and the guys at Current that are raising hundreds of millions of dollars for EV charging infrastructure, specifically around this last mile, as exactly the segment that you're pointing to, which is to say the smart guys usually are out in front and see things earlier. You're going to have some arrows in your back, but I appreciate you guys putting on the plow on the front of the train to help clear the way. It's really, it's very, very needed. As we look out to 2024 and beyond, what if any predictions do you have? How the market's evolving, where we might see roadblocks that we're going to continue to get? I mean, we're going to need as an industry to continue to increase our collective lobby and our collective voice. But there are opportunities, which you've just talked about, some of the ways that you see the market evolving, and then where are the areas where we need to collectively band together?
This is a people business. So people power, right? We need more talented folks joining the renewable energy industry. We need more folks in our specific sector, but we also need more folks in the sectors that we touch, right? Lawyers, accountants, land surveyors, engineers, biologists, right? All of these people, we need more of you. We also need more solar professionals, but we need all of those people. So there's a people problem, and the people power and the people behind this business is what's going to continue to propel the growth.
Yeah, and hinder it if we don't answer the
100%.
Yeah.
100%. We as an industry need to continue to aggressively recruit and attract talent from other industries where there's transferable skills, and even in industries where there might not be. We need to really be focused on that. The other thing in terms of headwinds, this is obviously a capital intensive business. It is a high interest rate environment right now. I'm hopeful that in 2024 things will normalize and even start to decline, but that obviously would be helpful for those that are out there developing projects. The other thing that I'm probably most excited about is look, the IRA has been the single biggest piece of climate legislation that we have seen, and is propelling growth, throwing fuel on the fire for this industry. That said, we've yet to truly monetize a lot of those additional ITC adders, specifically the low income adders. And so I'm excited about the fact that in 2024, those will start to materialize for this industry. and continue to fuel growth and investment and excitement in our business moving forward.
Yeah, also there's the coalescing around transferable tax that is just a huge opportunity to really propel the industry forward. Recently did an episode on that. That is fascinating. There's so many ways that folks are just wrapping their heads around how we're really going to be able to make huge strides in the coming year, in the coming decade. Aaron, it has been fascinating to get your insight into how the industry is growing and how you've positioned Renewable Properties and your entrepreneurial journey. As we wrap, I'd like to get a bit of an insight into what you see as the sort of the critical path to what we all believe is necessary and possible, which is a decarbonized or de-greenhouse gasified, we got to come up with a good word for that, grid that contributes to preventing, escalating beyond 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius, depending on which COP you've been to. If we're looking back from, 2050, and you and I are nearing the end of our careers, and we're happy and proud of the work that we've done, we've unlocked these big, audacious, hairy goals. What did we get right?
I'm going to go back to the people, because I truly believe that we have the technological solutions today to deploy at scale and to beat this thing. And so if we have the people, both within the industry, but also external to the industry, right? So if we had the right pieces of legislation around solving problems with the grid, with the aging infrastructure, with the right pieces of legislation around accelerating the permitting of these facilities, that as we sit here today, we have the right technological solution set to beat this thing. And it goes back to just being able to deploy it at scale and deploy it quickly.
You said something earlier that I think is really key to that as well. And that is helping folks identify and understand the transferable skills they bring from all walks of life, and that this industry is more than just boots on roof, bolting steel to the ground. There are many, many, many different skill sets that we need. And not only do we need to replace the aging infrastructure with flexible resources and a distributed grid, not only do we have the technological solutions to win this race, but when we have won, it will be because we were able to marshal the people that help move the society forward. As always, Aaron, it's a pleasure to get to know you better. Aaron Halimi is the founder, chief executive for Renewable Properties. Keep an eye on them. They're doing big things now in community solar and to come in electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Hope that we'll have a chance to bring you back on the show soon, Aaron.
Thanks, Nico. Really appreciate it, man.
Well, that's a wrap on today's conversation and a wrap on 2023, a year that has seen so many interesting conversations. I want to say thank you to Tor once again, my friend Solar Fred, for helping make the interview happen with Aaron. Aaron, my friend, it's been so fantastic watching you really come into your own as an entrepreneur, exercise the skills from your family business, from the real estate learning, and parlay that into one of today's most interesting community solar companies. I'm excited to see the evolution, not just of how Renewable Properties is approaching electric vehicle infrastructure, but how the opportunities for distributed energy resources really do open up the portfolio and the pot for all developers. Lean into your skill set, learn those transferable skills, apply them to the industry, and like Aaron, you can have a successful venture. I hope that in this year, you've learned a thing or two about energy storage and concentrating solar, neither of which are going anywhere anytime soon, despite all the naysaying. I hope that you've learned a lot about how solar development and capitalizing businesses works, how the residential sector is dealing with the reduction in demand, the increase in interest rates. So many, many interesting things that we've been able to cover in the last 365. I look forward to 2024 and all the wonderful examples of clean energy leadership that we're going to bring to you. We're kicking the year off right next week with an interview with my friend Stephen Su from Trina Solar, where we go really, really deep into the entire backstory of Trina Solar becoming one of the leading solar manufacturers in the world. In this, I'll say, never before recorded conversation with Stephen. He's never given this kind of an interview in this depth. So I hope that you will come back next week and enjoy that, which is our first episode of the new year, our first long form interview at least. And I want to say thank you to the companies that have helped support through the year: PV Case, Trina Solar, Bodie, Unirac, of course, SunGrow, who has been our platinum sponsor for 2 years now. So grateful for the companies that help make this show free to you so that you can tune in. The only thing it costs you is your time and attention. I'm grateful that you've given us that today. I hope that you find it rewarding. If you'd like to connect with us, please go to mysuncast.com. There are a myriad of ways to do so, as well as find out how you can connect with those sponsors. We link to them all right there on the homepage. And of course, in 2024, we'd love to help tell your story as well. Please reach out and let us know if you'd be interested in learning how we could help you in your content marketing and telling your story to the world. We've got to raise the volume of the voice of the clean energy revolution. That's what we're doing here on SunCast. Remember, you are what you listen to. Thanks again for showing up. It is half the battle.